Welcome to this short video looking at how to write your P1, M1 and D1 materials for Unit 5, meeting individual care needs and responsibilities. So let's start by looking at the criteria. What are you being expected to do for learning criteria A? Now we're going to focus on the first half of learning criteria A, so that's P1, M1, D1. And there are three key things that you're being asked to do and try and include within your write-up. So these are to explain the importance of promoting equality and diversity for individuals with different needs. This is the core element. You need to be able to talk about the differences in needs and how equality and diversity kind of help all individuals. Analyse also to ask you to think about the impact of preventing discrimination for individuals with different needs. So it kind of builds on from what you would have discussed in P1. And the evaluation is think about the success. So how successful are these anti-discriminatory practices for helping individuals with different needs? And you can talk about the strengths and weaknesses of those policies. Now with this coursework, it is a kind of a stepping stone. You have to do the pass to pass. If you want a merit, you have to include the pass and merit. If you want distinction, you have to do the pass, the merit and distinction. You can't just do the distinction D1 and get a distinction. You have to build up the layers of your answer. Now what I was looking at some of these exam words. What do these words mean? So for P1, a lot of the pass criteria talks about to explain. So this means that learners need to show with clear detail, with reasoning, with evidence or arguments to show and support an opinion. So this is kind of really presenting the information, presenting the evidence you've learned in lessons. This is what it means. When the word analyse is being used, and often this appears in merit criteria, you're being asked to break down the point of view. So you're given a piece of information for the explain in the past. Analyse asks you to break it down, to expand your discussion of it, to explain it, to show relationships and connections with other systems or other parts. It might be that you take some information or a piece of data and you relate it back to maybe a wider context to show trends and patterns. Another merit keyword is assess. And again, when learners are asked to assess, they're asked to present some information and consider multiple elements, multiple factors that apply to that situation. So identify is really, you're just giving the example, you're giving the point. Analysis is you're going into discussion and highlighting obviously lots of different connections and explanations. You're providing more evidence almost in some respects. And assess, you're being asked to think about other factors, other things that relate to it. Is it just this issue in isolation? So another way of putting it, as it says here, is weighing up the extent of whether something is true, persuading the reader that your argument is relevant. There are other things that support what you're saying. Here are the other factors that also have a role to play. And again, this is a big part of the merit, is you're effectively putting in more detail, more discussion to your points. And last but not least, you have the evaluation points. So you're asked to draw a conclusion. You're trying to highlight strengths and weaknesses of actions or decisions or elements you're discussing. Advantages and disadvantages, alternative actions that could be taken, the relevance or significance of something you're discussing. So again, with this part, with the distinction, the evaluative points, you're often trying to come to a conclusion and sum up and balance and address what you've talked about as whether it's useful or not useful. So really, when we come to write the coursework, there are three things we need to think about. So if you're aiming for a pass, you need to explain the importance of equality and diversity for individuals with different needs. You need to apply this to your chosen characters. You need to think about the impact of legislation such as the Equality Act. You need to think about the impact of discrimination and which might apply to your characters. And you're really going to focus on what is being done to make them feel equal, how effective that is going to be, and what the effect will be on the individual. So it's very much all focusing on the individual. For merit, you're going to think about the impact of preventing discrimination. So what is being done to prevent discrimination? How is that going to affect the individuals? Why are they doing that? What is the benefit for them? And really, a lot of it's going to think about how would someone feel if they were discriminated? What are you trying to avoid them experiencing? Distinction is, again, it's coming to the conclusion, it's kind of wrapping up. Is this, or are the actions being taken in your case studies, are they going to help? Are they useful? Will they lead to some form of change? So that's really the final bit with the distinction, is kind of summing up what has been done in your cases. Is it going to help? What could be done that might be better for them? So before we get into any more about how to write this, also you should put it back to the context. The assignment brief that you're given by the exam board highlights this context. You are on work experience at a community centre. The community centre provides lots of different support for different people in the local area, some of which have been referred by social services. The centre is staffed by trained professionals who are supported by a team of volunteers. And it says, as a learner on work experience, you will take the role of a volunteer. You're going to work with the team, and you're going to talk about two characters or characters you've met while on this work experience. So when you're writing your course, this should be part of the way in which you frame your writing. So, on my work experience, I met so-and-so, I met this other person, they have this issue, this is what they've been done to help them, this is why it's going to help them in the long run. So just keep this context in the back of your mind, because it's going to be important throughout the coursework. And the case studies are also important. There are 6 characters: Patrick, Alice, Martin, Nusrat, Brenda, and Maria, and Maria's mum. Now, with our writing of the coursework, we are choosing 2 of the 6 characters, and when you're choosing your 2, read through the case studies, think about who has an issue that interests you, or an issue that you feel you could write about, because again, you'll be writing this coursework project for a long period of time, focusing on 2 of these people. You don't want to choose someone who you're not interested in their case, or there's nothing that you feel could be developed to write about. So again, choose your cases carefully. Now, when it comes to the issues they have, Patrick is a same-sex relationship. He's tested positive for HIV. There's issues with sexuality. With Nusrat, she has learning disabilities, epilepsy. There's safeguarding concerns. There's also her age a factor. When it comes to Brenda, she has mental health issues and she's asthmatic. Alice is an alcoholic, taking antidepressants. There's also factors of her age that could be linked. Martin has become unemployed. He's got a skin condition and is feeling stressed. And lastly, Maria is a teacher, but she's also a carer for her mother, who has dementia, so experiencing lots of tiredness, sleeping pill use by Maria. She needs time off work, and there's also issues of stress. You could also, to some degree, talk about her mum as well, as almost like the buy one get one free case study. And when you're thinking about your case studies, when you've chosen your 2 characters, think about these kind of questions. What is their story? What is their issue? Are they part of a protected group? Have they got a specific need? Why are they using that community centre? What are the staff doing to help? Could they be facing any discrimination? Or what effect might discrimination have on them? How does it relate to their P.I.E.S, their physical, intellectual, and emotional social needs? Are there any special arrangements that have been put in place? And what else could be done to help each character? Now, coming back to P.I.E.S, I've mentioned it a couple of times already. P.I.E.S is physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development. And there are lots of different avenues with these. Now, really, when we're talking about these support arrangements, we need to kind of come back to P.I.E.S. Is the support having a physical effect, or helping them emotionally, socially, or intellectually? There's just some examples of these are on the slide at the moment, but also before I think about how P.I.E.S is affected. So physical impact, you could think about, does it have an impact on fitness or activity? Is it got any influence on diet and health or healthy lifestyles? Is there mobility or movement involved? Does it improve their health in the immediate sort of time frame or future health? Does it reduce stress? Can it be and it can be physical and mental health. It doesn't just have to be physical health. Intellectual impacts, you can think about, are they learning new skills? Are they developing existing skills or knowledge? Any impact on concentration, their thinking and reasoning, and their communication and language? Emotional support relates to maybe their mood and their happiness. Does it affect their self-esteem, their self-image, their self-concept? Confidence and stress could be linked to emotional, because again, it's about relationships and feelings. Does it provide motivation and self-development, or help encourage emotional resilience? And social impact would be, are they building connections with other people, making friends, developing their current or existing support network? So these would be some of the things you could link to in terms of support for P.I.E.S. So when we come to write P1, discuss the materials you've studied on equality and diversity, what it is, how it's enforced, why it's important. Include the Equality Act, link this to your case studies, link it to P.I.E.S, and again, try and make sure you are explaining stuff clearly, what is going on and why. A general example of equality might be this one here. So this introduction represents a clear general introduction to the topic with the concept of equality. It's got clear definitions and references to legislation. If you are using the reference to legislation and you are talking about the Equality Act, use a web link reference. Find a website which discusses the policy and include it in. We then move on to M1, which is your merit criteria. And this is all about the analysis we mentioned earlier about the impact of preventing discrimination. So what has been done to treat your characters with equality? And it's almost the flip side. So now you're saying, well, you're doing this, you're treating them with equality because they're doing this. This is to prevent discrimination and the individual feeling like. So again, it's how do you prevent discrimination, what is being done, and how is it going to help them? You can also then extend it to think about the setting. What is the setting doing? What are staff members doing? How are they preventing discrimination? And sort of coming together with how this is going to be beneficial to your character. Again, with this, try to avoid generic descriptive views. Try and be specific. Connect it to your character. Explain the effect. Don't just throw in random words or half sentences and just say, well, it will stop them feeling stressed. Try and give a reason why, how, what, when, where, who. So as we come back to that word analysis we mentioned earlier, when we're talking about analysis, you could start by talking about the negative effects of discrimination and try and talk about what these are and make them relevant to the person. So if Nusrat experiences discrimination, that could affect her self-esteem. This could lead her to feel stressed. The effect of feeling stressed, will it have an impact on her health? She won't want to go to seek support at the community centre. So try and make it relevant to that person. How would negative discrimination affect them? Talk about what's been done to prevent discrimination. So think about access arrangements, support, diet, advocacy. And again, think about how beneficial that support will be. Is this support going to help them be less likely to experience discrimination? What benefit will come from it? Also think about, will it have a negative impact in some ways? Which is kind of bordering on evaluation, but what's been done, is it actually going to help them? Try and include any support. If you can find any news articles or discussions about people who've experienced discrimination and actions that have been taken to prevent it in the future, drop these into your article. Even at the same time, if you've got a news article or a story about someone who has experienced discrimination and it talks about how they felt, put that into your discussions. So just as a very quick reminder here, I'll leave it on the screen. These are the 4 types of discrimination which we learn about in lessons. These will be the ones to talk about. When you're talking about these, try and think about if your character experienced discrimination, what type of discrimination could they be likely to experience? And obviously the importance of preventing discrimination is it prevents all these effects. So again, we talked about these in the lesson. This is how someone would feel if they've experienced discrimination. And last but not least, as I said, think about what is being done. Access, diet, support. What arrangements are in place to help the individual and to prevent them experiencing discrimination? This can also be good for leading into distinction. So when you talk about the arrangements and the support, you can then start to think about how effective it will be, how accessible is it, how how they're going to fund these support arrangements. Is that something that could affect their availability in the future? So when you move into M1 and how to set it out, think about kind of these general starting points. So define and explain the types of discrimination and what it is and why it's preventable. Think about your case study characters. What type of discrimination could they experience? Why would they affect that? Think about the consequences if they were discriminated against. How would it make them feel? What would they avoid? How would it affect their P.I.E.S? Link it, as I say, to your cases. Make it clear that you're talking about each character. You're not just talking about generic effects of discrimination. Write as much as you can for each issue. If you are going to use online resources from the internet or books, don't just copy and paste big chunks, quote them, or put a web link in to an article and explain what the article, sort of sum up the article and then apply it to the case study. Why is it relevant to your discussion? And also try and make sure you've used headings and subheadings and you're writing full sentences. And last, that leads us to the distinction, the evaluation of the success of anti-discriminatory practice. So this is the balancing up section. So what have been the issues and the arrangements put in place? What are the benefits of that arrangement? How does that help? What are the problems with it? What is it not addressing? What is it not doing? So when you get to the end and you're trying to make a judgment, this is really what that distinction is, making a judgment. So everything you've covered in P1, everything you've talked about in M1, what are the pros and cons of each? So what are the pros and cons of anti-discriminatory practices and policies? What is being done in the setting to prevent discrimination? Is it effective? What would undermine it? What could prevent it from having an impact? Could there be alternatives to protect your individuals? And as I said, make a judgment. Will this support work? Is it going to work? Is it not working? Is there something better that you could use as a replacement? So some of the things you could think about, is there any evidence of it helping or working? Does the person seem happy? Now, I know in this context we're talking about fictional case study characters, but based on their case study, based on their story, do you think the support is having an impact? What are the initiatives that could lead them to gain support, or are they in support of the initiatives? Pros and cons, as I mentioned, what else could be done? And again, try and use extra research, internet research, news articles, anything that can show alternative ways of providing treatment or care for their issue, or news articles maybe show that some of these measures don't work. So for example, employers are not obligated to give compassionate leave, but if they don't, they know blah 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 blah. So again, you could think about what is going on in this case study. So just as again a last little example, so the general information would have been presented first, and then the information is applied to the case study. So there are a number of effects that can occur as a result of discrimination. In the case of this is what's happening, this is what's being done. In the case study of so-and-so, this is what's being done. And again, you're thinking about the negative effects and the positive effects of preventing discrimination. And just as the final thoughts, how to wrap up the coursework. So start off with the key general information. What is equality? What is diversity? What is discrimination? And what is being done to prevent it? Link it to your case studies. How are they going to feel if they're discriminated? What is it going to do for their P.I.E.S? Apply it to your second character. Then think about individual context. So as you're going through this, try and keep everything relevant to the character you're writing about. If it's a law, if it's a news article, put it into your work, link it, reference it, and then make it clear, why are you talking about this? What has it got to do with your character? Why are you using it in your coursework? So try and make sure everything's detailed, linked, and relevant to your discussion. Quote secondary sources, as I said already. Make sure they apply. Use your headings, subheadings, and write in full sentences. And there we have it. So a very, very brief overview of how to get started on writing the Learning Aim A, P1, M1, and bits of D1 for the coursework. Any questions, any concerns, anything you're not sure about, speak to your teacher in class. They can go through this with you in a bit more detail. In the meantime, thanks for watching this. Hope it's been of help. And as I say, just do your best.